Beach detecting. It's fun, it's relaxing, and it can be very rewarding. It can also be a little bit tricky to master. If you're new to beach detecting, or if you've had a little bit of experience but want to level up your beach game, this is the video for you. I'm Adam, this is my metal detector, and that's a beach. Welcome to D-TEKT Sussex. Okay, let's start right at the beginning and have a look at the gear you're going to need for a successful beach hunt. Okay, so obviously the first thing you're going to need on the beach is a metal detector. I use the Simplex. You can use any metal detector on the beach. The more functions and features you have, the more flexible you'll be, but the most basic metal detector will still give you a fantastic experience out on the beach. The second thing you'll need, fairly standard for most metal detecting these days, is a pinpointer, just so you can really narrow down the small targets in the spoils once you've got it out of the hole. If you're interested in doing rock pools and rock formations with your metal detector, I'd strongly suggest bringing your digging tool with you. Specifically one with a pointed end. If you've got a serrated edge, that would be good. If you're doing rock pooling and digging around rocks and you find a signal between two rocks, it's a lot more helpful to have one of these with you, so you can just lever it out the crack rather than trying to dig through one of these big things. Speaking of which, scoops. If you're going to be on the beach, get yourself a scoop. A lot of people come down with shovels, and you can do it with shovels, but it's a lot more efficient, a lot easier if you get yourself an actual sand scoop. This is the one I started with. It's about 20 quid, you can get them online on eBay. It's the Garrett model. Tough plastic. I dug with this for about 6 months, and that's the only wear it had on it. So this would last a very, very long time. Very lightweight, great for beginners, great for kids. Not so great if you've got a bad back. If you're serious about your beach detecting, get yourself one of these. It's a metal scoop. You can fit a broom handle onto it, so it's a lot easier to use, and you can use it at arm's length. So you don't have to crouch down, you don't have to get down onto the sand or the shingle. You can just use it at arm's length, standing up, a bit like a shovel. This one was about 50 quid. It's one of the cheaper ones you can get. It comes with this handle on the front, which is removable. You just unscrew it. A lot of people take that off. I leave it on because I find it gives me a nice grip if I do need to bend down and pick up a heavy load. The build is pretty good, the welds are strong. As long as you don't abuse it, this will give you a lot of years of service. You can get more expensive ones. You can pay in excess of £100 for some of these, even more. But to be honest, if you're starting out, or if you're just sort of intermediate level, a scoop like this will do you absolutely fine. So they say prior planning and preparation prevents poor performance, and that is absolutely the case for beach detecting. Grab your smartphone, and I need you to have 3 apps on your smartphone. Number 1, you want a mapping app. Google Maps comes with most phones these days. You want some kind of mapping app so you can see the beaches from the air. Second app you'll need is a weather app, something like, for the UK, the Met Office app. Anything that will give you an idea what the weather is going to be doing hour to hour on the day that you're planning to come. The other app you'll need is one that will tell you tide times. Okay? Get an app on your phone that gives you the tide times for the areas that you're likely to be in. High tide and low tide. You can do this online if you don't have a smartphone, but if you have it on the app, it's a lot simpler and a lot easier for you. Now, when you're deciding what beach to attack, look at what time you have. When can you get to the beach? This week I'm here, the tide is all the way in. Okay, this is the only few hours I've got spare this weekend, and the tide's all the way in. So on a weekend like this, I'd hit the top end of the beach. So I'd be looking for an area on the map that's got amusements, restaurants, anywhere that people are going to be spending money, or there's going to be a high level of activity. So yeah, touristy beaches are key when the tide is all the way in. If you can, try and pick a time when the tide is all the way out. Okay? If you can do that, go to your mapping app and have a look to see if you can find shots where the tide is all the way out, so you can see whether the beach itself has much wet sand. Okay? If you're using Google Maps, you can usually zoom in and do a street view and pan around and actually have an explore of the beach with the street view. Normally it's done on the back of a quad bike, and you can actually go up and down the beach at low tide and see exactly where you want to be hitting. Plan where you're going to start. Do as much planning in advance as you can. The weather app's obvious, just going to tell you whether you're going to get rained on or not. If you're a fair weather detectorist, you might want to avoid the rainy times. Okay, just another note on preparation for your beach detecting adventure. Make sure you check the weather app and make sure you adjust your clothing to suit. If it's in the winter, if it's cold, if it's wet, if it's windy, on your doorstep, it'll be colder, wetter and windier on the beach. Okay? If you're nice and comfortable on your doorstep, go back, get another layer, because you will be colder on the beach. In the summer, the opposite applies. It can get very, very warm in the summer. The sun can feel a lot stronger on the beach. Make sure you wear appropriate clothing, make sure you don't overheat, bring lots of water, and make sure you have sun cream with you. Okay, a little bit of sun cream prevents you getting burnt and giving you a really, really bad experience once you get home. So take care of yourselves, be safe, and dress appropriately for the conditions you'll expect. Okay, so let's have a look at swinging technique while you're on the beach. We all know when you're metal detecting, the coil needs to be off the ground, as close to the ground as you can get, but off the ground, not touching the ground. And you sweep, keeping the coil flat and level over top of the ground. Now, it's especially important on a surface like this, where we've got pebbles or shingle on the ground, to keep the coil off the ground, because if you don't, you'll scratch the bottom of the coil cover. Scratches, you can then have bits of sand and particles and things caught in those scratches, and if those particles are mineralized, that could in time affect your detecting. Which is why we suggest you always take the cover off and clean it out every now and again, just in case you've got something stuck in there. The other reason for keeping it off the ground is if you strike the coil onto a pebble or something hard, you'll get ghost signals. The metal detector will usually beep, and you don't always know you've done it. Okay, so as you're going across the ground, try and keep an eye on the surface, on the terrain. If you've got a big pebble, if you've got an uneven surface, try to just maneuver the coil over and around any obstacles that are on the ground there. Try and keep the coil flat, don't be tempted to do that, but yeah, just move the coil up and down over the obstacles, just to keep the coil from contacting the ground. The other reason you don't want to be striking pebbles with the coil is you may damage it. So yeah, little tip for you there, keep an eye on the terrain as you're detecting. If you're on wet sand, look out for rocks and anything like that. Wet sand is generally quite flat, but if you've got rock formations and things in there, just keep a little eye out and try and keep the coil away from contacting those as you're moving along the beach. The other thing is, as you're swinging, keep your pace very, very slow, probably slightly slower than you would in a field, and make sure that your swing is overlapping itself. So if you make one arc with the coil, make sure that your next arc overlaps that arc. Very much the same as what you do in a field, but do it on the beach especially because of the uneven terrain. Okay, so you found yourself a target with your detector, you've pinpointed it, you know exactly where it is, you get your scoop. I normally put it on the edge of where I think the target is. I can then crouch down, put my detector on the ground, and then hold the handle as far forward as you can. Okay, don't bend yourself, don't hurt yourself, but just push it at an arm's length. Put your foot on the back and gently apply pressure. Okay, you can then pick that up, jump it off to the side, give it a check with the detector, see whether you've taken the target out of the hole. If you have, get the pinpointer on that. If you haven't, detector down, and the same thing again. Now this works for sand or shingle. The reason I say give sort of a slow, progressive, firm pressure on the back rather than kicking the scoop is because kicking the scoop is more likely to damage the scoop. The welds here will probably break after a few impacts, and if you hit rock underneath, you'll damage your scoop, and you may also damage yourself. You could hurt your leg muscles, you could damage your foot, and your lower back can also suffer if you kick that too hard and it doesn't give out underneath your boot. So don't kick it, don't be tempted to be violent with it, just be gentle, put your foot on it and apply gentle pressure, and your scoop will last for years and years and years. Okay, so I'm going to quickly run through the settings I use on the Nokta Makro Simplex. If you don't have a Simplex, don't worry. If you have similar adjustments on your machine, you may want to try them out and see if it works for you. So on the Simplex, we do have a beach mode. Now a lot of people ask me why I don't generally use the beach mode. And the beach mode is very good for getting rid of the mineralization that you find on the beach, but it is only one tone. You don't get the range of tones that you get, say, in park or field modes. And also, if you look in the top left-hand corner here, the bottom 3 notches are notched out. You can't change that, okay? So that means when you're swinging around, you find a target, you're not going to hear the iron tones that you'd normally hear at the bottom of the range. So ideally, you want to free those up. Now, what I normally do is I ground balance in beach mode using the auto ground balance feature. Okay, the exception to this is if you're on wet sand. If you're on wet sand, I just take the ground balance down to 0 just manually, just because that works best down there for me. But I auto ground balance otherwise in beach mode, and then I'll flick it over to park mode, specifically park mode 2. So just quickly on the modes, on Simplex you've got field mode, park mode 1, oops, get the right button Adam, there we go, park mode 1 and park mode 2. Okay, I use park mode 2. It's not the deepest, it is the shallowest of all the functions. But to be honest, on the beach you're not going to be wanting to dig too deep anyway. If you're on shingle or sand and you dig beyond maybe 8-10 inches, chances are it's going to be filling back in on itself. You're going to have to make the hole wider and you're going to be there for a lot longer than you need to be. Also, under a lot of this, a lot of the beaches are rock formations, so you're not actually going to get down terribly deep anyway. So depth isn't a huge issue, which is why I use park mode 2. It's not as deep as park 1, it's not as deep as field, but you don't need the depth on the beach. Park modes, both of them are very good for getting rid of trash. You'll still detect a lot of trash, but you'll just discriminate out a little bit some of the tattier signals. And if you use park mode 2, you can swing a little bit faster. You get better target distinguishing between targets. So if you have 2 targets close together, you'll be able to sort of single them out better than you will in park mode 1. So that's why I use park mode 2. Sensitivity wise, if I'm up on the dry end of the beach, I tend to have it up full. You don't need to take it down too much. As you get closer to the water, I normally bring it down by a couple of notches. And if you're on the wet sand, you can bring it down to 3 or 4. That just gets rid of any chatter. And again, you don't want to be digging too deep. It's going to be filling up with water. You're not going to get too far down. So don't worry about losing depth. This is a good setup. This is a setup I use, and it works for me very, very well. Give it a try. Okay, let's have a look at the anatomy of a beach. There are a few different sections of a beach to be aware of. Under this water here, there will be wet sand. The tide's fairly high at the minute, so you won't see it, but under there is wet sand. Now, wet sand is somewhere where you're likely to find things like rings. Picture people in the sea, in the summer, swimming around with their rings and jewellery on. Because they're in the water for a while, their hands wrinkle up, shrink down, rings will come off. So you'll probably find rings down that area. Bear in mind, if you're hunting on the wet sand though, you won't find many signals, okay? You could spend an hour or 2 and not find a single signal. So the signals are fewer. You will still find aluminium and a few bits of tat down there, but you are more likely to find rings and jewellery down on the wet sand, okay? If we pan around, You've got the section which is sort of under the water at the minute. The water's nearly at high tide, and you can see this line coming down here, which is the tide mark. So when it's high tide, the water comes up to that kind of area. So this kind of mid section between the tide mark and the wet sand, we'll call that the middle of the beach. That's an interesting section. You won't find an awful lot of great stuff down there. Probably find a lot of aluminium, a lot of things that are washed up in that kind of area. You'll still find the odd coin, you'll still find the odd ring and a bit of jewellery, maybe a watch. But yeah, bit of a no man's land in the middle there. You can see, certainly in the beaches in Sussex, you've got these sea defences. We call them groins, G-R-O-Y-N-E-S. And they are regularly spaced down most of the beaches in the area. That's just as a sea defence. And if you go down the groin, so if you run your detector down each groin on either side, quite often you'll find things have collected there. Now if you look at the groin over there, you can see a lot of the groin. Okay, the pebbles are quite low compared to the groin. If I pan around on this side of the beach, you can see the pebbles are very much stacked up to the top of the groin. Okay, now that tells you that generally speaking the tide will come from this side to this side. It's pushing the shingle from that side of the beach over to this side of the beach, and you can use that to your advantage. If things are being pushed this way when the tides are in, you're more likely to find objects down this side. So spend a bit of time going down that side of the groin. Check the beach, see which side's higher, and you'll find a lot of things will be collected down the groins, especially on the side where it's piled up like that. The other part of the beach is the top, so it's the area between the dry area between the tide mark and the promenade. Now if you've got an area which is fairly touristy, so you've got a lot of restaurants, cafes, ice cream vans, that kind of thing, entertainments, amusements, then this is the area where you're likely to find spendables. Okay, if it's high tide and you can't get down to the wet sand, go up to the top, find a beach where you've got lots of amusements and things to keep people happy, things that people will be putting their hand in their pocket for, and you'll find an awful lot of coins along the top. In an area like this, where you've got not many amusements and just sort of natural features, you may find things where people have dropped through dog walking, dog collars, that kind of thing. You might find the odd little bit of jewellery, and especially if you go to the more remote places, for example down that end, you may well find yourself some older coins, pre-decimals, that kind of thing. So that's the anatomy of the beach and where you should be looking at each section, depending on what it is you're looking for. Now up from the top of the beach down to the water line, as I said in my settings segment, I'd be in park mode 2, auto ground balance, full sensitivity up here, and then slowly as I make my way towards the sea, I drop the sensitivity down probably to about halfway by the time I get to the sea. Same principle on the settings going down the groins, and then when I get to the wet sand, manually ground balance down to 0, take the sensitivity right down to 3 or 4 bars at the most, and yeah, stick in park mode. Okay, so we've covered the different areas of the beach. Now let's look for some more specific things that we can see on the beach which might help us find some nicer things. Now you can approach the beach detecting by starting at one landmark, so for example on this beach you probably use a groin, and start at maybe the top and then walk all the way across to the other side, come down a couple of feet and then walk all the way back. And just continue doing that down the beach until you go as far as you can. Now doing that you'll cover the entirety of this beach, and it'll probably take you, when the tide's out, maybe 2 hours to go from the top to the bottom. There is a more efficient way. Okay, if you've only got 2 or 3 hours out, you don't really want to just concentrate on one bay. You want to cover as much ground as you can and be as efficient as you can. So rather than doing that as we would in a field, we want to have a look around the beach and see if there are any hot spots, any areas where we're more likely to find items. I already talked about the groins, and going to the side of the groin, side of the beach where things have built up. Now have a look at the beach itself. Imagine you are on your holidays and you've come down to sit on the beach. Where are you going to sit? You know, are you going to sit right up the top there next to the path? Probably not. You're going to find an area like the high tide mark here where there's a bit of a bank. So what I would do on this beach is I would first of all follow this bank all the way around the top there. I might do a couple of passes, one right towards the edge and maybe one a couple of feet up, just where people are likely to have their picnic blankets, be sitting there eating their chips with their coins in their pocket falling out, and that's likely where you're going to find a few bits and bobs. So think about where you would be if you came down to this beach. Where would you sit? The other thing to look for is especially if there's been a storm or high winds, look to see if there's any cutouts. It's not very clear here, but there are a few areas just down here where there's some sort of horseshoe shapes where the beach has been stripped. If you're on a shingle beach and there are little areas of sand, that's a dead giveaway. That means that the wind and the rain and the weather has stripped down layers from the beach. Go onto those areas, especially if you've done them before, because the beach could be a couple of feet lower than it was previously and you get a lot more depth. There'll be things hiding there that you wouldn't have picked up before, but you may pick up now. So definitely look out for those. When you're out on the wet sand, a good thing to look out for is black sand. And that just looks like black powder on the surface. If you find areas of black sand on the wet sand, definitely attack those areas, especially if it's plentiful. These are heavier deposits of sand, and where you find places like that where heavier things have been deposited, that's likely to be where things are going to end up. Tide comes in, washes some items off of the beach into the sea, and the heavy items are going to be deposited in certain areas depending on the tides and the currents. If you find black sand, that's likely to be where you're going to start finding some items which have been deposited, like coins and jewellery. So make sure you're looking out for areas like that. And as I said before, if there are amusements, restaurants, that kind of thing along the top, make sure you go around those areas. Quite often you'll find there'll be a cafe with a sort of an eating area cut into the beach. Definitely go around the perimeter of that, and you'll definitely find some coins around that sort of area. As people are sitting down, coins fall out of their pocket, they don't notice. So yeah, definitely keep a little eye out for that. So what's the best thing about beach metal detecting? The beach. Make sure you take time to enjoy the beach while you're here. You've got the sea crashing against the shore. You've got wildlife flying overhead, the salty sea air in your lungs, and some absolutely fantastic views like these. So I hope you enjoyed that video this week and found some of the tips and tricks useful, especially if you're brand new to the world of beach metal detecting. If you did find it useful, hit the like button down below and let me know. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comments section, and if you're a more experienced detectorist and you'd like to add additional tips to this, please do so in the comments down below. I'd be very grateful if you would. If you are new to the channel, I go out every single week for a metal detecting hunt, video it and put it up on YouTube for you to enjoy. So if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button and you'll get to see those videos every single week. In the meantime, enjoy your beach metal detecting and I'll see you soon. Take care.